Fighters in Star Trek are a very different concept to fighters in Star Wars. When we're first introduced to fighters in Star Wars, they are hit and run tactics. They are their own strike capability. They are an alpha strike which self-deploy, attack the enemy, and then fade away. For some reason, no Venators have survived, and we don't realise this until we see, of course, the Clone Wars, and we see the wonderful Venators in service and go, those would have been really useful. Immediately then people go, well, hang on, no, they don't need them. They are hyperspace capable fighters. They don't need such things to get them around. Well, no, but having a base which can self-deploy, self-defend, and can get closer to the fight and to allow you to rearm should you need to and repair, so you can go around again if you have the target opportunity, or you can be extracted if you're damaged, is all fairly useful things. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fighters in Star Trek. Now here there is a different scenario. For starters, the Federation is far closer to the Empire in organization than the Rebel Alliance. They are a fully functioning state, civilization. They have borders they have to defend. They are fighting fleet battles versus other fleets, not rebellions. And here is the problem for them. If their fighters go in, carry out an alpha strike, run out of photon torpedoes or get damaged and have to go home, they might not well be able to get back in time for the remainder of the battle, in which case they're rather pointless. Fighters which only turn up, do a dashing charge and then go away are the equivalent of Renaissance-era cavalry. And I'm not talking about the decent stuff that's eventually organised and appears in the Civil War in the United Kingdom, the Four Kingdoms, which is discipline and does what it's supposed to do. No, I'm talking about the stuff which mostly fought for the Royalists and decided to go charging off, plundering various, pack trains rather than actually fighting. Those fighters will be devastating, but they won't be any real use, because your opponent will just outlast them. And then you've lost any advantage they give you. So there's a real problem if you don't have carriers. Now, this is where the Galaxy carriers come in. Think of them as force multipliers. Yes, you can self-deploy your fighters there, so your carriers aren't limited in terms of air group of carriage of their fighters. And that's a really good thing for a space battle, if you are not limited in terms of numbers by the number of hulls you have as carriers. But having Galaxy ships as your carriers means that those ships can self-defend themselves because they still have a Galaxy level firepower and force structure, but also they can stay quite close to the fighting, quite close to the battle, without too much risk. And if the fighter gets damaged or it runs out of photons, it can go back, rearm, get repaired, and carry on again. It can even possibly get replacement crew should it have injuries it needs to sort of put back on into the medical care. And that's the real thing they're there for. Don't think of them in terms of carriers like we have them, and don't think of it as terms of limiting based on the idea of, well, we see them self-deploy, so therefore they can't be using carriers. It must be a la Star Wars. No, because that wouldn't work. Again, if we consider some of the battles in the Dominion War go on not for minutes or hours, but days. It's again rather similar to the Clone Wars and the huge wars which were fought in the Star Wars area, where they did use carriers because you need your aircraft, your fighters, to be able to rearm. You need them to be able to repair. You need them to be able to be sustained. It's not a case of them actually getting to and from the battlefield sometimes. It really isn't. They can get there. They can self-deploy if you can stick in a hyperdrive or a warp drive, depending on which universe you're in. It might not be a particularly fast warp drive, in which case you might well want to put them in your galaxy, because otherwise they might not be able to get where your fleet wants them to be quick enough. But they can get there themselves, which is great. You could even do a case of you deploy some when some turn up in their galaxy carriers with following waves coming behind, knowing that with the galaxy carriers there, you'll be able to support and sustain those fighters, those parasite craft. So this is the reality we are talking about. We are not talking about fighters especially in a space combat as you would necessarily understand them based on what we look at in terms of carriers today, or even in terms of what you see in Star Wars, because in Star Wars you are dealing with a guerrilla war. There is a difference. I think myself they've got it wrong. I think they would have been far better having the Venators. For example, there would never have been a case of, oh, we are stuck on a planet. We are being invaded. Oh, we now need to deal with stormtroopers and all this stuff. No, you could have just, oh, there is an Imperial scout ship being detected. We will now disappear. Bye-bye. While scout ship has to deal with fighters. The world in Star Trek is different. The galaxy is different. The Federation are different. They need the carriers to sustain their kind of operations when you're dealing with large fleet fixed battles where you cannot run away, because if you run away, you lose ground. Where you have to sustain and support a front, where your fighters are literally being sacrificed to save the lives of your larger ships and to make up the numbers and the strength of your force overall. It's a different modus operandi. And it's going to require carriers, but they don't necessarily have to conform to those carriers are our sole source of aviation, especially not if you have those self-deploying fighters. Those carriers become pit stops. They become fighter logistics hubs, even for larger fighters. So that's what you have to think about when I'm talking about a Galaxy fighter in the recent Galaxy Cruiser video. I'm talking about fighters and I'm talking about a carrier which is part of a whole force doctrine. Now, I realize this is not shown in the television show. There are hints there if you look for them, but it's not shown. And it's not really discussed in this framework in the beta or the gamma canons. But if you read between the lines, and if you apply a thought process to it of looking at it from the naval history perspective and the operational requirements that they are going through, that is the sensible product of what they are describing. Those carriers, they do have an air group, but far more important than an air group is their ability to be a pit stop at the site of a battle. Now, I hope that explained it, and I hope that is of help to everyone. Thank you very much for all the comments. They're really cool, and it does look like this Sunday is going to turn out to be a live discussion of the Galaxy class, and I'm fairly sure, from judging from the comments, that there is going to be a lot of discussion of the Abraham Lincoln and her two Galaxy carrier sisters. So, looking forward to Sunday. Thank you very much again for everyone who's listening. Thank you very much for everyone who's supporting. And just thank you for taking part and listening to my channel. Take care.